determine the way that they want the city to be governed. Now, on your agenda, you have recommendations. I'm gonna say that mine are just considerations. The number one consideration that I would ask of this commission would be that the mayor shall appoint a fire chief subject to council approval. The governing body shall enter into a contract with the fire chief. It shall establish, amongst other, compensation, benefits, duties, and responsibilities. At the present time, the fire chief is under the city manager's direction. I believe the fire chiefs should be accountable to mayor and council simply because of its duties, obligations, and responsibilities for public safety of our community. Okay. Number two consideration, I believe the emergency management position be an exempt position under the direction of mayor and council. That position presently is under the city manager direction also, simply because of its duties, obligations, and responsibilities for public safety of our community. Right now, that position is being held jointly efforts with the county and the city, and the office is located at the county offices, I believe. Number three, consideration. Should the mayor pro tem oversee the council meetings in physical absence of the mayor? Right now, it simply says during the absence of the mayor. Number four, consideration. At the organizational meeting following the election, each councilor member must be appointed to serve in 3 city council committees. No 2 members should serve in one same committee. Voting members and serving them throughout their terms in office. Presently, we have some, I don't know, that aren't involved in any committees, I don't know. But it'd be good to have councilmen share the responsibilities of being in those committees and making mayor and council decisions easier when they bring forth their knowledge. Consideration number 5 would be the city election officials, if you want to hold them accountable. Any member elected shall reimburse the city general fund in the amount of cost of his or her election. He or she withdraws from the position elected his or her term in office. Reasoning other than health or death with doctor's approval. Another thing is reasoning being now we have to have 2 years and 3 years terms elections for that seat. No overlap and consistency. And let's take into consideration the cost of having another election. Simply, I think we need to help people that want to run for office and want to serve to be accountable. And elections cost $3,000 each, or between $2,000 and $3,000, depends. And sometimes we can have one, and sometimes we can't. Sometimes the seats stay vacant for a long time. We had in the history of Vegas, I think we had an election where there was a tie. We had to wait another month and a half for another election to break that tie. And when that person came in, it lasted 2 months and vanished. And here we are left with a vacant seat and no penalties. We had managers and mayors have left. And I think that they ought to share their cost of the election. Now, if it's 8 people or 4 people, regardless, I mean, it's still a fair share deal. So it's 4 people, $500 each one, whatever the case may be. On the question of 8 councilmen versus 4 councilmen, I served under a council of 8 from 2002 to 2006. First of all, the election or the effect of the election would not be coming into place till 2027 if something like that would be introduced or passed. I mean, it also has its pros and cons. Long meetings till midnight, 2 o'clock in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning sometimes. More representation, more accountability, yes. If you have a vacant position, you still have representation for that ward. The original 1970s city charter had 8 councilmen, the first council. In 2006, the public was in uproars with the city council for different decisions being made. The people proposed that it cut down from 8 council to 4 council. The people that were running that term supported the 4 council. They also supported cutting the salaries from 20,000 back to 15,000 and back to 10,000, what we started with in 1970. And it remains to be at 10,000. To me, salaries depend on the individuals and their work ethics. Some people show productivity and some people don't. I'm not here for the money. As a matter of fact, when I ran the first time, the Las Vegas Optic asked me, well, what do you think about the salaries, counselor? And I said at that time, you know what? I didn't even know that they paid. I didn't know there was a salary attached to it. And I was the left of the day. But you know what? If your heart's in it and you're going to be a public servant, that's what it's all about. I mean, we do have other commissions that get paid $30-some thousand and this and the other. If you guys all feel that salary is an issue, I mean, we can get on board. We'll deal with it. In closing, I'd say that the task at hand is to address the current changes to the city election process first. Because we abstained from April elections, we abstained to the November elections, and the charter was geared towards the March elections. And a lot of that needs to be deleted or changed or adapt. Those are the things that I would, request that be looked at first in order for the government to continue. I recommend to stay away from the city ordinances. They have many processes in place in itself. I say stay focused on the current charter. Changes needed to be made. The charter is not set in concrete. It is a working document. It is intended for us to do the right thing. We can review the charter every year if mayor and council would wish to. But the request is every 5 years from the charter. Some sections contradict others. Those need to be addressed quickly. The 2 best persons that can help you out are to my left, and that is your city clerk and our city attorney. Take their guidance. They've been through this many years. They have a lot of experience and they know most of the issues that we're having. And I want to thank you for your service and good luck in your commission. And I stand for any questions you might have. Okay.
Any questions from members of the commission?
No questions. Well, Mr. Counselor, thank you for
Pretty
your
clear.
comments.
Well, thank you very much.
I appreciate you accepting me coming before the commission. And I understand you have a lot of work ahead of you and time flies, so, and our clerk is on a deadline, so are we. So good luck to you guys. Thank you very much.
Counselor.
Thank you, Counselor.
Next item, insight from Finance Director Morris Madrid regarding the city budget. Mr. Director, I guess our question was, and other commissioners are more welcome to add to my comments at any time. We were talking about the possibility of going from 4 to 8, 4 to whatever the number is. And I think the question that the commission wanted to know about, Morris, was, will the budget support any of these changes that I guess the voters at some point would consider?
Chair, members of the commission.
And go ahead, I didn't get that.
And we were looking at giving them a raise too.
Yeah, oh yeah. well, first increasing the number of counselors and then possibly also, moving up the salary. There's been some comments made that only retired folks were qualified to run for this position if it stays really low. But people that would like to spend some time, on the council or run for mayor may want to have a little more money to pay for some of their life expenses. So you're right, Meredith, sorry about that. I was thinking just, going from 4 to 6, 7, 8, whatever the number lands up be.
Well, there's a little bit of background. The elected official positions are paid from the general fund. And in our case, our gross receipts and general fund position is solid now, has been improving, and probably will continue to improve. And the main reason for that for the next few years is all of the FEMA money that's coming out and is growing our gross receipts here in Las Vegas. And to give you a real short answer on both, Mr. Chair, if the people say they want it, we will find it. But in our case now, we don't have to look very far. The city is in a very good financial position and should be for the next few years in the general fund, given both increasing the number and increasing the salaries. The city has historically, over the last few years, had material vacancy savings. We are trying to minimize that by recruiting and filling positions, and that is a trend also. But like I said before, the trend in gross receipts revenue in the general fund has been rising and will continue to rise. So the short answer is yes, we can afford both.
Okay, I'm gonna defer to Benito, because Benito made a very interesting observation a couple of meetings back about the average salary that you figured statewide. And I'll send it over to you, Benito.
Thank you, Chairman. So, in just a quick Google search in one of our last meetings, and it seems like the mics are working again, so can you hear me now? Looking at the compensation for a city councilor in Las Vegas, New Mexico, which is $10,000, which was the pay in 1970.
That's what Councilor Montoya said.
And, I looked at towns comparable to Las Vegas, Taos, Española, who are in the range of, the state average is about 24,000, and those communities are within that average. From my perspective, if we want to increase political participation in the community, you have to make it attractive to individuals to give up their time and their expertise in those positions. So looking at state averages, I guess, is kind of where I lean towards how do we make ourselves more competitive as a city in creating interest in city council and city government.
Well, and you have a good point, Commissioner. As you all know, the majority of cities and municipalities in New Mexico are tied to their county's compensation. So when the county commissioner's compensation goes up, the councilors go up. As a matter of fact, Las Vegas was like that for a period of time too, until 2006. Between 2006 and 2010 is when it changed. So I believe the San Miguel County Commissioners are in the mid-20s now for compensation and are allowed to grant increases by due to a change in legislation. And if I'm way off base, Counselor, please let me know. But those are the options. And, I guess only the voters as a whole know whether that should, in their vote, whether that's a factor or not. But essentially, if the voters want it, we will find it.
So, taking into consideration what you just said, Morris, I know that the city at one time was independent from the county commission, and then it started going into that formula. And then 2006, when that change happened, I think all that was abandoned. We went back to the 10.
Yes.
I think there was consideration of going to 20.
Yes.
That's what it was. And then they revolted on that and had a special election and went back to 10. But the county just gave themselves a raise across the board for commissioners and I think the elected officials, sheriff, treasurer, clerk. So I know that doesn't happen in your current term, it happens in the future term. So in other words, the next person that comes in to fill those positions has the new rate, right?
That's correct.
So a percentage of that, just give us an example. Let's just say that the county's was 30,000. Is it standard, the way they calculate what the city council would be and mayor?
Well, presently, no. Presently, it's a flat amount, but it could be tied to the county's compensation. And previously, it was tied directly dollar for dollar, depending on the class of the county,
Okay.
whether it's A, B, or C.
And I know that Gino told us about that in Santa Fe County. So the city council in Santa Fe, Counselor, is that tied to the commission as well?
I believe so, yes. I think we looked that up at the last
And I don't
meeting.
think it was dollar per dollar, right? It was a percentage?
It was a percentage
Yeah, okay.
of a Class A county
Okay.
commission.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, ma'am, go ahead.
what, and I don't know who to ask, what would be the pros and cons to tying it to the county commission or not tying it to the county commission? Because I'm not seeing a reason to do that without knowing more than that.
Well, I'll give you two perspectives, the finance and a former elected official. My political opinion is, when you have compensation that's high, you may attract candidates that are looking for a job, they're looking for an income, instead of looking for an investment in their community. So that's one possible impact. The financial impact, of course, is you're paying for elected officials to set policy at a lot higher rate, and you may be sacrificing actual work being done in City Hall or out on the street crews or whatever. It's being paid for by the general fund. So there's a trade-off. And while the city is in a good position now, that may not always be the case. There have been years past where the budgets have gotten very tight and the finances may be better used in service to the community rather than income for elected officials that are here to make policy. And I think Mr. Montoya made a good point that if you are sincerely interested in serving your community, then the compensation is not really a factor.
Hey, you want to add something to that, Gino?
Mr. Chair, Councilor Britt, or Commissioner Britt. One, to answer the question about how does Santa Fe do it, I'll read to you the line: "The councilors shall receive compensation for their service to the city in an amount equal to the maximum amount authorized by the legislature to be paid county commissioners in Class A counties as provided, blah, 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 as may be amended from time to time." So it's actually not a percentage, it equals the county pay for a Class A county. But I know in the last meeting, somebody else did it as a portion, somewhere around 75%. The reason that some entities do that is because that compensation is revisited by the legislature and adjusted in statute. And so the intent is to say, we're not picking a number that's gonna stay the same for all eternity. It's going to get adjusted so that this compensation will likely go upward in the future as determined by the legislature, and we don't have, the political part is, we don't have to go through, are we giving ourselves raises? The legislature will handle that. So
So-
those are the two contexts.
So adjusted sort of with, what is it, consumer price index? To some
Right,
degree?
yeah, it's very parallel to pinning it to someone else's index. Here it's the legislators adjusting county commission compensation through legislation.
So the legislature doesn't allow, you know, depending on what class of city it is, to have a compensation of 100,000 a year. They know they'll break the town, right? So they're looking at that. If you stop and think about it, if you consider the consumer price index from 1970, it's 10,000 then, and we're still at 10,000. You know, literally, I know that the time that the mayor puts in, this current mayor puts in, he's actually probably losing money coming to City Hall because he hasn't had an opportunity to have a livelihood in most cases, because probably one meeting after the next. I can't complain. I'm not gonna tell you what I made, but it wasn't anywhere close to this. And the hours were long as well, but, city councilors, I think my dad made like $35 or $70 a month back in the 80s. I think I made 130 something a month as a counselor in the latter part of the 80s. And I think mayor, I think I took home like $600 a month after taxes and everything else. So that was 98 to 2000. So I guess there's a lot of flexibility to consider here. We just want to make sure that the budget will at least currently sustain this. The neat thing about this is that you're never giving yourself a raise. It's for the next person or the next election, whether you get elected back to that position or not. And I guess my other question, Gino, would be, does Santa Fe have a difference between city council and mayor on the salary?
Well, remember Santa Fe just.
Oh, it's a
converted
salary.
Full-time.
It's a full-time, okay. I think the mayor would argue he's sort of full-time, he doesn't know it. Don't tell him.
So, Mr. Chairman, if we go to a percentage or the same as the county, then we wouldn't have to put a number in here that becomes ridiculously low or more than we can afford. We don't have to put a number in the charter. It is just simply based on the county. Is that right?
Well, yeah, you put it like that, but I think you're gonna have to explain to the community what you're doing.
Right.
What they can expect.
Well, that's your job.
Well, it'll be our job to recommend it to the mayor and council, and they may have to speak on our behalf, but that's what it boils down to. It's a political issue, but at the end of the day, I think you have to figure a fair compensation for the amount of time you put in. You know,
I agree. I think, yeah, like, if I didn't know from the outset, I would think David was a full-time mayor from 8 to 5 in the city office every day, you know, and then all the trips he makes all over. And now, you know, we have a 60-day legislature. I'm sure he's gonna be there often, so, you know, I agree. And in my opinion, I also feel that we need to look at mayor's salary being higher than councilor's salary. I really do.
well, we have a lot of,
And if we did that, the budget would still allow, right? If
Yes.
the councilors at a certain, and then the mayor would be a little higher, the budget would still be stable to
And
do
that's
that.
not uncommon across the state. You know, mayor's salaries are generally at least a little bit higher. It's more responsibility.
go ahead, Benito.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I would like to note that I had an uncle of mine that used to have this saying, and I think it could hold true in this regard, and is that sometimes it takes money to make money. And that's, you know, a different fashion, but, you know, we've operated from this deficit mindset as a city for a long time. We're paying the same salaries that we did in the 60s, right? And I think that creating fair compensation for the governing body, the city council, and for the mayor allows for more to happen, right? I know the mayor, I see him at all types of events at Highlands University and in Santa Fe. I'll be having lunch in Albuquerque, and there he is meeting with somebody, and most likely on behalf of the city. Now, those are the types of things, those networks are what helps cities thrive and grow. And if we're able to do that on a larger scale with a more invested governing body, how much does that return to the community of Las Vegas in terms of investments, in terms of partnerships, in terms of economic growth? We don't know because we've never tried it. So that's what my perspective on the matter.
Anybody else?
Just to piggyback off Commissioner Pacheco's saying, and I think that actually goes the same, like to increase the number of counselors as well. I think I said like last meeting, 4 counselors can only be in so many places, but you have different events, and when you have 8, that gives you more time to go promote our city, go to all these other events about our city, for our city. There's so much going on at the same time. And I think we need to look at that as well, that makes a big difference.
I think that we also probably need to consider the salary for mayor, probably a little bit separate from the council. I think that is something that I think we should consider. Now, I know that we've had instances in the past, I'll not point out the actual years, but we've had some very involved mayors and some very non-involved mayors. So, and those are 2 different, things to consider. But once you make this determination, it's for the busy ones and the not so busy ones. So we have to take that under consideration. I know that the time that the person can put in here is enormous. And even for the council, literally, I bet you if you're in enough committees and you want to stay connected to your constituency, you're going to be out almost every weekday out somewhere. And then if there's events on Saturdays and Sundays, once it warms up, everything changes. And now everybody's staying inside because of the cold, but it's going to warm up and things start percolating. And all of a sudden you have this going on, that going on. And then it's the calls, it's the personal attention that the councilors and the mayor have to make to individuals when those issues come up. And I think, piggybacking, after what you said, Benito, it's the networking. I'll tell you, that's the way I look at it, the way the mayor probably gets a lot of information, ideas, and actually bounces ideas off of other elected officials. It's the networking at the committees he's involved with, Municipal League, and all the other stuff that they do, being involved with stuff. And you know that too as well, Morris, you're a councilman. It never ends. Even if you go to the National League of Cities or an ALEO conference, it's all about learning and going to the classes and finding out how to do X, Y, and Z. So networking is a big part of it. And sometimes if you restrict the person and not make it feasible for them, it's hard for them to say, well, should I even go to this or not? We need them to be networking. I can say that. Lord knows I helped a lot of mayors in the past. They'd call me and say, Matt, do you have a number for X? And I had one. Or what do I do with this? Who do I call? I have a name and a number, And you know what I'm talking about, Morris, you've done it. I'm sure, Mayor, you do the same thing. So those are the kind of things that I think we have to continue to foster. So anything else that anyone might have a question of Morris in regards to the budget? And Gino, do you have anything that you'd like to add?
No, I think that was very helpful to understand the context, since you are examining the sections on the number of counselors and the compensation. Just having an idea of the finances and the ability to for the city to be able to pay for what you're considering. I think that's helpful.
So in a word, yes.
Yes.
Okay, Morris, thank you very much. Cassandra, did you have information that's related to this?
I do. I was gonna bring that up, I think, when we're going over
Thank you, Morris.
going over the information.
Thank you, Morris.
Okay. Well, then I think what we'll do, we'll jump in right away to that. If you don't mind, we'll jump into you, Gino, and if you want, we can start off with that piece.
Yeah, I think we're gonna tag team. Part
Okay.
of the assignment to both of us at the last meeting was a review of similar communities. What's their compensation on one end? And on the other, what is their legal structure do they determine compensation by charter or compensation by ordinance? Okay, right. So Cassandra did an examination of compensation. And we're gonna match up on most of the cities, but I think we may have looked at some other cities too.
These are the ones I chose that were similar in population or right around the general number. I listed the number of counselors, the districts, the mayor's salary, counselor salary, the population, and there were a couple that had the commissioners rather than mayor council. And I took the information off the website from either their charter or their ordinances, whichever it was located in.
Do you know how many of these are home rule? Probably Los Lunas, right?
I think I in a roundabout way can get there.
I think,
Artesia does not have a charter, Deming does not have a charter, Espanola does not have a charter. Let's see what other communities I looked at, those were the ones I looked at.
they do not have a charter?
They do not have a
So
charter.
how do they operate?
They're able to, they have authority to pass ordinances, and so they're using ordinances to identify compensation in those.
Oh, you mean just this piece is not in the charter? They actually do have a charter for the community, but not
The
in
ones
regards
I
to
named off
compensation
do not have charters.
at
They
all.
operate under the municipal code.
Okay,
So anyone that doesn't have a charter follows word for word the municipal code. As a charter entity, we get to look to the municipal code for guidance and then make changes within our authority.
okay.
Are we home rule?
Yes, ma'am, we are.
And that's why we can't have at-large counselors, is that right? So Taos must not be home rule?
Okay. I think that's a size issue. I think over a particular population, you have to go districted. I think that's the case. Under a certain population, you have the option to go at large or district.
So all these towns are not very much money.
No.
Don't serve in Silver City,
No compensation at all.
and that's in their charter. I assume on the no compensation that they may get per diem. School boards have no compensation, but they do get per diem, per meeting.
This is interesting.
Yeah.
You may have checked some of the larger.
Yeah, the one I added to this was Hobbs, which was charter. Hobbs is mayor compensation 26,000, and counselor compensation 12,000. And then they did a hybrid thing in their charter in which they set the compensation for year X, let's say, I think it was year 2020. They set the compensation and then said it can be amended by ordinance going forward. But Artesia seems, Artesia hasn't, no, I'm sorry. Silver City, it was in their charter. I will tell you, Artesia sets their compensation by ordinance, not by charter. Deming is by ordinance because they don't have a charter. Espanola doesn't have a charter, so it's ordinance. And then, as I mentioned with Hobbs, they initially set it by charter, allowing for amendments by ordinance.
What's the population of Hobbs?
It's in my table here.
Hobbs and Artesia have a lot of oil money.
Yeah, that's right.
A little bit.
Hobbs. Hobbs population 34,000.
Really?
Yeah, it's a big town.
No.
So probably the town
Especially
that's,
during an oil boom.
yeah, the town that's,
Oil bust, it's 5,000.
yeah, it depends the day of the, or what season you're in, right? 2 weeks on, 2 weeks off. Artesia's probably the closest to population to us, right?
Yeah, they're very close there. Artesia is 11,301, and we are 13,753.
So 12,000.
Well, that's information to recognize and come back with.
Dang, Mayor
Deming is
doubled.
pretty close at 14,008. And Deming, do you have Deming in here? You do?
Yes.
Okay.
If you notice, so the mayor does get more salary than councilors.
Pretty much in all the
All of
cities.
these.
And double in a couple of them.
Yeah.
You ready for that, Mr. Mayor? Just kidding.
Now, Silver City for a long time was a 1-year term. I know they changed it at some point, but it was a 1 year at a time. It was an election every single year. And that was crazy. I know I talked to the mayor back then and he said, well, it doesn't matter. I've got to get ready to run again. I said, what are you talking about? You just got in every year. Well, I think they changed it to 2 or 4 probably, but back then it was 1. Okay, I guess we'll consider looking at these numbers. I guess when you tie it to the county and a percentage of the county, you don't really have to worry that you have to change this or review it. And if the legislature puts parameters, it can't exceed those parameters, depending on what class of county we are. That's sort of an automatic thing. I think the reason that the community voted less counselors and less compensation was because of what they saw happening with the 8 counselors and the possibility of going up to 20 or 25, whatever the number was back then. But I think that was a moment in time and they had a reason to do that. I think, you stop and think about what's happened in the last number of years. Just stop and think about the amount of time that was used just on the flooding. How much was used in consideration of the fire? The hours that the mayor and council put in, it's enormous. Those events, there's no guarantee we're not going to have anything like that again. But I'll tell you, the amount of hours, I know I saw my brother, I'd drop him off sometimes, wouldn't get him till late in the evening. Or sometimes I'd go in and, oh my God, it was just a nonstop emergency that I saw the mayor and manager and city councilors continue to work with a whole bunch of agencies. So the amount of time that you can put into something that out of the blue it just happened. Nobody thought we were going to have a flood like that. Did you have a cloud stick around town for 4 hours in one place? And after a while, we're all sort of swimming on Hot Springs Boulevard. So that was crazy to see. So there is a lot of work that goes into it. But I think we need to look at fair. And I know that a couple of the other commissioners have brought up, if we have the compensation so low, who are we attracting? And that's also some of the comments that have been said by other members of the commission. So I think we need to look at something.
And I think we all agree that who that attracts would be retired people and rich people. If we, pay so little.
We don't have any retired people in town, Mayor. We
We don't
don't.
have any rich people.
Yeah, okay. I wasn't gonna include everybody, but I was gonna say, retired people, what are you talking about? Okay, do you have anything to add to that, Gino?
No, not to that table.
Okay,
That was a big assignment for both of us to just sort of understand both compensation, but also how's it being done? And it's being done primarily by ordinance, because the question did come up, should the charter be setting this, and the charter only gets revisited every so many years, and it's subject to a vote by the public, and the public might get upset at a certain number, or just think, I hate to phrase it this way, but sometimes the public will say, oh, they're all worthless, let's pay them 0, right? And And so it becomes difficult to set compensation through a charter. So that was one of the questions asked. Do we continue to set it through charter or do we not? That's a question for the commission. But showing you the trends of what other similarly sized communities are doing it. Are they doing it by charter or are they doing it by ordinance? It's primarily by ordinance.
Well, if you take the number of 10,000 divided by the hours in a year that an average person works, it comes out to $4.80 an hour. I don't know what coffee costs. I don't drink coffee, but I'm sure it's more than that. So
It is. I bought a cup of coffee this morning.
So we're looking at, bare bones to some degree. But really, at the end of the day, we can make a recommendation to the council. The council will make the recommendation to the community, and ultimately, they'll make the decision. This is not being done in the dark of night. This is out in the open, so whatever we come up with, there's two levels of scrutiny still. We have to go to council, and then the council has to get it out to the community.
Question, please.
Yes, ma'am.
When the people vote on what we've worked on and what the city council has worked on, and we have something to present to the people, they can't say, we'll take this part and not this part, we'll take this part and not this part. So if they shut the whole thing down, then where are we?
Well, that's sort of something that Gino talked about the last time. So you want to repeat that again, Gino?
We asked that, right? You can break it down.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry, ask the question.
The question was, what if they like everything except the compensation? And you talked about possibly doing the entire piece and the compensation as a separate question.
Right. I don't have an answer on that.
But you've seen it happen before, right?
I have seen it happen before where certain attitudes and certain ideas can drag down a charter vote. That said, the real research I need to do, and Cassandra and I talked about it yesterday, I just didn't, in prep for this, I didn't get to that section. How much can we parse up the questions on the ballot? Now, I would say you don't want to have a ballot with 35 questions on it. But do you go, these are the questions, do we go section by section? These are the amendments, section 1, 2, 3 through 8? Or is it all or nothing?
The direction we got from the council was one document.
I need to confirm that is the possibility or whether or not it needs to be broken up.
I guess when we have our joint meeting, we can visit with them about that. I want to say of all the things that would bring everything down would be the compensation. But I think if it's reasonable, I think you may have a shot at it.
Or the 4 to 8 also. Or the fire chief under the mayor instead of the city manager. We don't know what people will pick out.
Well, if we get too wordy, then we're back to item by item again. So we have to be careful that, it's up to us to put together a comprehensive review and get it to mayor and council. And then if they decide they want to do one item as a separate question from the entire, that's up to them.
Comprehensive.
But they're looking.
Educated, that the community understands.
And I think education is part of that. I think unfortunately, the last couple of elections, there was nobody even knew those questions were there till they showed up to vote. I didn't even know, and I keep track of everything. We didn't even know that those items are gonna be on, and they all lost. I think there was 5 of them. Was it 3? It felt like 5.
I'm a strong believer in educating the community on, especially on stuff like this, what the vote's gonna come up. They need to be educated on,
We could even have
And-
public forums.
and the reasoning for it, it's, I know back in my time when I was a village counselor up in Cimarron, we did have a lot of public input forums, meetings before we did a lot of stuff, and things like that, got feedback. In fact, I think we were going over ordinances and things like that, and we had public input come in, and we were doing a strategic plan, right? what the community wanted to see, what they felt was priority over this and that, and we probably did 5, 6 meetings, and we got a lot of input from the community, and then whenever we made decisions and all that, it was kind of community-based, and they felt a little better because they felt like they had more input with it as well, so.
Awesome.
So that's the plan with us too, right? Well, at some point, when the council has, I guess, considered the last piece or before the last vote, we would open it up to community to come and give input?
Yes, I think the commission needs to think about the ordering of things. You have talked about the meetings with, meeting with the governing body at a point in time that you're able to get feedback, ideas from them to consider. You also test what proposals you're thinking about. So there's this joint meeting of the commission and the council to have that discussion. Are we on the right track? Here's what we're thinking about. What are you thinking about? What would you like to see us consider? So that's not towards the end, that's more in the middle. And then at some point, what's the public input on that? Now, you do have public session on every single one of your commission meetings. Public could have come in today and, or the last 3 meetings to give their ideas. But I do think at some point in time, you may want to promote that we're having a meeting, we're getting ready to go to the council, why don't you come in and give us some input? Or it could be at the joint meeting and say, okay, public, come into the joint meeting and tell us all at the same time what you're thinking.
And I was thinking of maybe a small article in the Optic or on Facebook saying, the Charter Commission is reviewing the charter and the public is welcome to come to each and every meeting and to understand why we're making our decisions and to get your opinion.
I think you sent us a notice already, so we do our part on the radio.
Yeah, you also have an opportunity to do maybe, in Santa Fe, they call it a My View. That you submit, like an op-ed that you submit to the Optic to say, okay, here's a joint statement of the commissioners or a statement of the chair saying this is the work we're doing and we want the public's involvement. It gets a little more notice sometimes when it's an article versus an advertisement. Or if you have both of them, then it works pretty well.
Well, I think at some point, we need to probably consider that, but I'd say let's keep working towards the joint meeting. Because, we want them to give us input as well, and then come back and put a document somewhat together, and then maybe ask for one more shot from our perspective at our level. And then ultimately, the mayor and council can do whatever they want at their council meetings, especially when this item comes up. I can imagine that a lot of work happens like it's done in the past, and then there's no issue till the last second. And then they start bringing in the ropes and the poles and everything else that they want to hang everybody with. And sometimes that either works in a positive manner or in a negative, and then that's where some of the issues come up. So I think we'll look at doing that, and I'll visit with the mayor about what's the best process that he'd like for us to consider.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, ma'am.
As far as whether one item in our whole review is going to kill it to the voters or not, and when they would like the rest of it, maybe we could look at each 5 years, how it has worked when the people voted on the proposal 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Isn't that all in the records?
Yes.
Would that be hard?
And we had one of the elections with 19 questions, and I believe there was only, if I'm not mistaken, 3 that did not pass for those 19.
So we could do that then, break it up.
But the
It was a
council
lot.
asked us to do one document, so we have to be careful that we don't create that. But let me just say
Well,
this,
yeah,
the first time we did this, the whole thing passed when we became a home rule community. And I'll tell you, we had some wholesale changes because we never had gone that route before. So that was one document. I don't think it was involving compensation, because we had just gone through the recall of 4 council seats, or whatever they call that. It was the election of that. So I think the whole thing passed initially, the first one that we did. The second one, I don't remember that the commission had come up with that many questions, but the mayor and council added some above and beyond the commission. And those are the ones that I think suffered the most. But I can't tell you. I'd have to go back to the minutes to double check. So I think what we need to do is make it as concise and as direct as possible, but hopefully getting enough public input to make the best decisions. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, and I do want to sort of remind everyone that it's actually the councils, the governing bodies, final document to the county clerk for the ballot.
Yeah.
That'll appear on the ballot. So I think as an advisory commission, you can make the recommendations, you can submit it in as one question or divide it into multiple questions. But ultimately it'll be up to them. And they may initially advise, hey, we want it as one question. And then they might go, I don't want this one to tank it. Let's move this one out and do it as a separate.
Yeah, that's their discretion.
That's going to be their discretion on the back end.
Okay, anything else in regards to this? I think we beat this one up pretty good. So let's move on to the next one. Do you have more of the homework that we gave you,
Oh, yeah.
Gino? We're going to turn it over to you because almost like we can't move forward till we get your latest input.
Okay, I'm gonna hand out, one of the other items of homework was revisiting concept 2. And that was the number of counselors, how they're districted, and then compare it also with the, the revisions to the municipal election code.
Okay.
And so, I don't have any changes to concept 1. Oh, and then, you pointed out that, 2.01 needed to jibe with 2.03. And so I went in and I did the research. This one actually, for all the red lettering on there, this one was pretty intense. Working on concept 2. This took me a lot of time. So if we look at concept 2, the feedback I had on this, well, again, was let's take it to 8 members, member districts, and numbered 1 through 4. Some of this I picked up from other charters, mainly Santa Fe's, because they mirror this structure. Their governing body is 9, 8 counselors, 2 from each district, and a mayor. So I went into their charter, looked at how they structured it. So 4 dual member districts numbered 1 through 4. And shall collectively comprise city council, mayor, who shall be the presiding.
Where are you?
Where are you at?
I'm sorry, concept 2 in the middle of page 1.
Section 2.01?
2.01B. Yes, sorry. Okay, I'll allow everyone to sort of catch up visually. And so in this concept 2, going to 8 counselors, 4 districts, 2 per district. These are the edits I'm making to reflect that direction. So 2.01B is the language I just read. And then how does that affect, how do we implement that? It's simple for me to edit B and say that, but now we got to move down in the charter and implement that. So that's over in 2.03, which is qualifications and election of of counselors. Now, I have to make those edits on how we implement 8 on down the line, but when we get to paragraph A, I looked at paragraph A to say, how does this jibe with the revisions to the municipal election code? And Clerk Fresquez has mentioned, how much do we say and how much do we reference? What I did, and that's why I put in brackets where I got the language from, section 1-22(3)B, that's what talks about residing within the boundaries of your district. Because the language has been loosey-goosey, not only in our charter, but everybody's charter and out in the ordinances. So there was this big revision, and I tried to track the language as best as possible for section 122(3)B. So that it reads, counselors shall be qualified electors of and registered to vote in and physically reside within. And that's the really big change, is the physically reside within the boundary of districts. Before it was just registered, and people were registered over there, but they weren't living there. They were living over here. So physically there. And that also kicks in vacancies. Under the code, when you no longer physically reside within the district, then you've created a vacancy. Okay?
That whole item was tested here before.
Mm-hmm.
Back then, they were saying, well, that's my parents' home, and we're gonna land up owning it when they're not here. And we had an election back in, God, it had to have been in the 1990s.
I deal with this issue with governing body members probably 2 to 3 times a year.
So that physically reside within, that takes care of a lot. It's not the speculation.
Yeah, it's not the rental property that they own. It's not a shed someplace.
Trailer
Yeah.
park.
And I've had to have those hard conversations with those members to say, you're here or you're there. But if you're living in the big house and you're elected in the shack, you either have to move into that shack or you're gonna give up the spot. And some have given up the spot and some have moved into the shack. Yeah. Okay, so physically reside within the boundary of the district, there should be a there, in which the person desires to be elected or to represent, and this is where I start quoting the language of the code. And the person's record of voter registration shows that the person is both a qualified elector of the state and was registered to vote in the area. This is a big difference. It was silent in the charter before as to when they had to reside there. Oh, I'm gonna move there before election day. Well, you're trying to get on the ballot in August. Well, yeah, I don't live there yet, but I'll live there by election day, or I'll live there by the day I'm sworn in. The code now says, person and was registered to vote in the area to be elected to represent on the date the proclamation calling a local election is filed in the office of the New Mexico Secretary of State. So even in municipal election years, the Secretary of State issues an election proclamation. And the date that they do that, I believe it falls somewhere in July-ish. And you have to be able to prove with your voter registration that you were registered to vote at that location in your district on the day of the proclamation or prior.
So 120 days, 180 days, does that sound familiar, Sandra?
I don't know exactly the amount of days.
I'm trying to
is,
do the
but-
math. 1, September, 3. Yeah, it's about 120.
Okay.
It's about 120. And this feeble brain didn't retain it. I did see the calculation yesterday. But
Okay. All right.
I'm going by my own experience as a candidate, and I believe that proclamation came out when I ran for council in July timeframe. Okay. So that's the edits to A. And that, let's just look at that edit. I would probably need to lift up into concept one also. If we keep things the same and just try and get legally valid with 4 members, we would still need to make this change in concept one. Okay, so now that's paragraph A. We got a lot more work to do in this section. Paragraph B, we need to make it reflect the proposed structure. 2 counselors shall be elected by the qualified electors in each of the city council districts. And now, actually, you did have physically reside, but it seemed to be in the wrong area. It should be an A, it shouldn't be here. So I deleted that out and carried that out. Counselors shall be elected. Okay, here's where algebra came in place and I had to take off my shoes so I could count to 20. I had to figure out how you implement this in a timely manner. And I looked at our own charter, how we did it a few years back. I looked at other charters, how they phased in going from 4 to 8, making changes in the numbers. So, counselors shall be elected for 4-year terms. That stays the same, with 4 districts electing counselors in each general municipal election. The terms of the 2 counselors from each district shall be staggered, so that 1 counselor shall be elected from each district at each regular municipal election. So
you're taking into consideration what we currently have. That's why Ward 2 has no election, right?
right.
For 20, yeah,
Yeah, you're getting ahead of me.
okay, no,
You're reading faster than I am.
no, well, I've lived through it.
Yeah.
So I know what you're talking about.
So I'm doing the setup here is that you, in a district with 2 members, you've got an election every 2 years. So this district is in this year, 2 years later, the other district's up, 2 years later, you're up. We've got to stagger it that way. So I'm updating the language to reflect, now you got 2 members per district. They have to be staggered in their elections. And then how do we implement that? So, next sentence is at the regular municipal election of November 27. These changes are going to be implemented in 2025, but they'll be added in 27. At least that's the understanding I had from the direction of the commission. It's not going to change 1 year from now. We're not putting all these people, we can't put them on the ballot for next year. So after 2025, the next election is when this happens, and that's 2027.
So with that said, we'll have, in 2027, we'll have 8 if we go this route.
Exactly.
We're not gonna wait for 2 and then 2 more. It's 8.
8 will be then. And to keep the staggered terms, some of the first ones coming in are going to be on 2-year terms.
And some 4.
And some on 4. So, for the 4 wards, this is tough. For the 4 wards, I had to start calling them position 1 and position 2 within each ward. Position 1 is all the existing counselors, okay? All the 4 that are there now, they're going to be position 1. The 4 new ones are position 2. So then I had to call Cassandra and I had to say, okay, when are their terms up? And when are they back in? So when we look at 1 through 8, Ward 1, position 1, they're up for a normal election in 2027. So they're up for a 4-year term. Okay. Now, Ward 1, position 2, this is the first time they're coming to the table, but they need to be staggered. So we can't elect them for a 4-year term. So we elect them for an initial 2-year term, then 4-year terms thereafter, And that's gonna keep them staggered in Ward 1. Does that make sense? That's
Do
great.
you have another copy by
I
chance?
handed to my dog this morning and he was
He needs a
completely
copy.
I
confused.
need a copy.
Oh, I didn't, that's,
I was absent.
So Ward One, Cassandra, is currently held by Councilor Olivari. So
He's not up till 2027.
he's not up till 2027?
Yeah, because they chose to extend their terms when we opted into the local regular election.
He's the only one, right, that's up in 2027. Unless we change this.
There-
It would be 1 and 4, but because 4 was appointed, because mayor moved out and became mayor, so.
Moved up.
25 is, the 25 election on its own is messy. Because you have vacancies and you have appointments to vacancies. And they have to keep their position at the next election. Even if they're midterm. So mayor's term would not have normally been up. Had you stayed in your council position, you wouldn't be up in 25. You'd be up in 27. But they appointed to a vacancy and that person has to run this year to stay out the term.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm just trying to follow the flow.
Yeah, in 27, it's gonna be clean. It'll be clean for us to get to this.
Mr. Jones,
And we're not even talking about vacancies between 25 and
Hold on one second, Mary.
may I ask, Mayor Romero, if you have a sense of what the council thinks about this, or are we spending a lot of time on something that they're gonna say no way? And that's that? Do you have any idea?
I guess I'll just kind of, I would think that it's something to be discussed. And the reason why I say that is, I mean, we've been in a unique situation, specifically this year. And, there might be times that maybe one ward doesn't feel that they're being represented. So I think that it's a unique situation. Me, I have my personal feelings on it. I think going back to 8 would probably help out.
Okay, thanks.
It's mine, I think, I would say it's a 50-50, I mean, honestly. And it's something to be discussed for sure, so I think you're doing the right by having actually that discussion.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
And these being staggered, then it won't matter. Both individuals represent the whole ward, right? You don't break no boundaries within the ward for position 1 and position 2. They're both representing the whole ward
That is,
because they're staggered. So you don't have to because I remember back at the time, one time. No, never mind. Because I know at one time, both ran at the same time, but who had the higher number of votes took the 4-year term and who had the lower took the lower. I've seen that before.
right.
And so the person that got the higher votes got the 4-year term, and the person that got the lower votes got the 2-year term.
Oh, interesting.
And that was smaller villages, things like that, because they used to do it at the high. You took the seats at the higher population vote and the lower vote. You understand what I'm saying?
You're just complicating an already complicated
Yeah.
thing.
Okay.
But
All
that's
right,
a
we're good.
solution.
So they're staggered, so
Yeah.
there'd be
They're
no
staggered.
issues or anything like that. They're
And
both
you won't-
representing each ward, and they're staggered, so there'd never be.
So we will
It
all have
provides
2
for
counselors.
Yes. So you understand my questioning, right?
Yes, I do. And the intent is so that you've always got consistency in the representation. Someone may lose an election, but you've already got someone with 2 years' experience who understands the district and understands how council moves. So, you don't risk losing the historic knowledge all in one election.
Okay.
And so, yes, staggered. And I believe it's actually in these dual member districts, I think it's actually required by statute that they be staggered. And so this math problem that I did here is how do we stagger it? And And so that's the part I was getting to, but Chair, you had a question?
Yeah, go ahead, Benito.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a comment. I mean, as we're going through some of the draft language. In light of the information that was received in terms of compensation. When I look at that information, I see the majority of the municipalities that we are compared to are at 4 counselors. And I'm just putting, this is just my perspective before we get too deep into the discussion or recommendations as to the number of counselors, but being that the compensation, we're close, I guess, in terms of where other comparable municipalities are. And I believe if we're going to make I think what I would recommend is we consider what we're going to want to move forward into. I think it's one or the other in my mind. We can't have both. And when I look at, and if it's, from my perspective, I look at it as quality over quantity. Right? If we stay at 4 and we increase compensation to increase the quality of the pool, so to say, in theory, that's where my thought lies. But I think if we're trying to do 2 things, it is going to be a tough, we're facing an uphill battle. And I say that based on the data that was presented to us today and what other municipalities of our size are doing. So that's just my comment as we're thinking about this.
And I guess I'd like to add, because, we really can't ask the mayor to really get into some details, because he's actually the current sitting mayor.
Right.
Who was just recently, prior to that, a sitting councillor, okay? And I guess people can call my comments a bias if they want, but I experienced 8 councillors. And I experienced being one of 8 council members back in the 80s. So I can tell you, and I'll just point this item alone, and it's the votes. In the 2-year term that I served, I broke 1 tie. Since we've had 4 councilors, I can guarantee you there's no 1 year that there's only been 1 tie. And I don't have to look at the documents. I just know that it's just really become extremely complicated, almost to a point where it shut down the city. I mean, the city could not move forward because all you needed was 2 councilors and a mayor to pretty much continue to move in the wrong direction. So just with that alone, you can't shut down the city. You still have to operate it. Court cases were thrown in. That slowed down the process more. Sometimes those were running concurrent with the actual action items that were going on at the city. I just see that, just for example, the day that I saw the mayor and 1 councilor talking to the emergency group during the flooding, the mayor's watching to see if another councilman walks in the room. Once that happens, he steps out, and he did. That's a hard thing to do. And, if you at least have the mayor and 3 councilors, they can visit on X. And then those 3 leave and another 3 come in, you can at least get the information out quicker when a decision's being made from what I consider a full-blown emergency. But it is really crazy to just have such a small number. And then if you have 1 counselor that doesn't make the meeting for whatever reason, literally 2 counselors run the city. And the mayor has no input. There's nothing that individual can do. So I just look at, and I want, people may say, well, you're biased. Well, maybe I am because I actually lived through it. And I'm just going off of the easiest stuff, the easiest recommendation that I can see. And I'm not in that position. I've been there at both positions in the past. I just know for efficiency's sake, you've got to figure a way to make this thing work easier. And we've been through a lot. The community has been, I can't remember the last few administrations that didn't struggle with breaking the tie for almost every item on the agenda. That's hard. That pretty much, and what it does when you have more, I think what you learn how to do is build consensus. Okay? And that's something that we've sort of lost in the city for whatever reason. And it's because of the number of counselors, okay? Building consensus lets everybody give their input. And sometimes you may think, oh, this thing's going this direction. And then all of a sudden, one counselor brings up an item and says, but how about this? And then you start seeing things start, and then they start within themselves building consensus. And that not only happens here, it goes all the way to DC. There's no building of consensus anymore. I think as a community as small as ours, that we all know each other, we have to, that's the role that the mayor and council need to do, is build consensus for the betterment of the individuals. So I see the least number of people make it harder to govern.
There's one other inherent issue with the number. I may have mentioned this to you before. Either in ordinance or in charter, you have certain votes that are majority members of the governing body. It does not take effect unless it's a majority vote of the governing body. Layer on top of that the mayor only votes to break a tie. And if you have one member missing, you might have a 2-1 vote. 2 is not a majority of the governing body, 3 is. So a 2-1 vote in favor dies. Because the mayor can't vote because it's not a tie. And it doesn't pass because it only has 2 votes and not 3. So that, and I've actually seen that gamed in some municipalities. And that's
What do you mean when you say game? They do it on purpose, right?
Regarding compensation, Commissioner Pacheco, I just also wanted to look at the trends that we're seeing. You made the observation of, hey, we're pretty commensurate here. If it's accurate that it was 10,000 in 1970, that was a lot of money back then. Wow, that was a lot. But it's commensurate. It's within the ranges that are here. The only other thing I would point out is that it seems to be the trend that the mayoral role gets a differentiated pay.
Agreed.
Yeah. So whether or not council stays the same is also a consideration for you, whether or not the mayor gets a different.
We're sorry.
We derailed you, so we'll let you get back to you. You did a lot of work on this. Go ahead, Dino, we're not gonna let you run away.
Okay, so how do we play out phasing in 4 new counselors and keep staggered terms? This took a lot of brain power. So number 1 through 8. Number 1, Ward 1, Position 1. That's the existing counselor in Ward 1. In 2027, they're up for a normal 4-year term. Now we have to add a new position, Ward 1, Position 2. They would need to be elected for an initial 2-year term, then 4 years thereafter. Okay? Ward 2, Position 1, existing counselor.
In 2027.
Yeah, no election at all in 2027 for that position because they're up now in 2025. So their term ends in 2029. So they're not on the ballot. Ward 2, Position 2. Okay, well, to stagger it, they're just up for a 4-year term. That's fine. Moving to 5, Ward 3, Position 1. No election, 4-year term ends in 2029. And then you go to Ward 3, Position 2. Okay, they're just up for their 4-year term in 2027. Ward 4, Position 1, they're up for election for a 4-year term in 2027. That means we've got to stagger Position 2. So Position 2 is up for an initial 2-year term, then 4-year terms thereafter. We would need to put that in charter to get that phasing in done in 2027
And then,
under this proposal.
Yeah, and then, Cassandra, every other year, the mayor runs 1 time, and then the second 2 years from then, the judge runs. So the judge will be running, at some point, when it's all synchronized, it'll be the mayor running with 4 counselors, the judge running with 4 counselors. Because the mayor and the judge aren't at the same,
Same time, no, they're not at the same
their
time.
terms end differently. Okay.
I will tell you the other, let's see, when's the mayor up again? In regular term, in regular term.
So the
25?
mayor is up with two and three.
Okay,
So the next
And four,
term,
1 and 4 is the judge, and
2 and 3 are the mayor. So the next term for mayor is 4 years.
this is just a sidebar. It really doesn't influence any of this. But you will see that certain people will run for terms within a ward. When there are two positions, they'll run within their ward either to coincide with the mayoral election or to be opposite the mayoral election. So they have the opportunity to run for mayor, but they don't lose their seat.
Yeah.
And then, that's just an unavoidable.
So,
What they would do is come in and register to vote, to run. And you'd ask them, okay, Ward, for, let's say it's 2027, okay? And they come to see you, Cassandra, and they say, you'll ask some of them, especially Ward 1 and Ward 4, you'll be running for the 2-year term or the 4-year term, right?
And of course, the county clerk does that now. They file.
I mean, wherever, yeah, but that's pretty much what, they have a
we'll have
choice.
the information for them.
Yeah, but we'll have, that's the choice they have, 2-year or 4-year.
Right, and that's where the term position 1 and position 2 come in. That's typically how I think a clerk will see it, is, okay, are you running for position 1 or are you running for position 2?
What if two people ran for position 1 and nobody ran for position 2?
That can happen, but
There'll
there'll be a lot of phone calls at 5 minutes till.
Yeah, I would say both the ones that ran for Ward 1 shouldn't be qualified because they should have split up and both been elected instead of gone head to head.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. There is something out there in law that if no one runs for a position, it's probably gonna go into the appointed role, but I don't recall. There is a way to fill a position where nobody ran.
This is San Miguel County. There'll be calls before 5 o'clock.
Somebody might want to run for one position or the other depending on who else is running. You know, I might say, oh, I could beat this person, but I couldn't beat this person. So you,
I bet folks will be talking to each other. Hey, you run for 1, I'll run for 2.
Like Matt said, at 4:45,
There'll be a lot of calls.
everybody filed for position 1, nobody filed for position 2.
Well, how about a 2-year term
Yeah.
for nobody running against you?
But to answer your question, I believe that would still stay vacated and be appointed, because they just couldn't put that other person because they didn't run for that position. Correct?
that's interesting.
Yeah,
That's interesting.
that sounds about right. On the state elections, there's a large gap between the date that the ballot is run and the date that you must file. And because it's partisan, they go to the
Right in.
to the party county. It's not commission. What is it? It's the county party. They go to the county party and then they get nominated by the county party to be put as the party's representative on the ballot.
Yeah, I
I think
think
if someone's passed away during the process, they'd have to do that.
Yeah, some will withdraw for sickness or other reason, and then
We're getting pretty technical now. I'll tell you what, every possibility, we're doing it here in Las Vegas.
This is Las Vegas, all those possibilities
We'll
arise here in
probably
Las
be
Vegas.
challengeable, right?
Believe me.
You might think that this is funny there, Gino, but you don't know, we'll test it here.
It will be tested here in Las
It
Vegas.
will be tested. All right, and I'm going, so those are, as far as amendments and drafting go, that took the lion's share of my time. That's not all of the assignments from the last meeting. It's a significant part, though. That takes me down to, between the checking of the other charters and ordinances of parallel cities. That took a lot of time. I did, in my homework, we looked at 2.02C regarding removal, and there was a question about whether that correlates with the recall process. I didn't catch it when you gave me the assignment, but as I went to go review it, we're dealing with two different words, which is not recall. The language in this section is removal. There's a statutory removal process that a council can engage in for malfeasance. And so this language doesn't need to be updated because all it's saying is it's within the purview of the governing body when to pursue removal. And so
And if there's not a process on the charter, we go to state law?
it's in state law.
Okay, but we
Only
just
in state.
go over there.
Yes.
So it's malfeasance and misfeasance? Or just one? I always thought I always heard there was the two routes.
It might be both of them. This is the second time today I've quoted that statute, but I have not read it in about a month and a half. So paraphrasing, I'm saying malfeasance, but it may include misfeasance also. But there's a legal standard to pursue it, and a judge will decide whether or not the standard has been met. The governing body just decides whether or not to file the legal action for removal. And then the judge decides whether or not removal is warranted. If that makes sense.
Okay.
Okay, redistricting. This one is interesting. I had thought that redistricting was very specifically.
Where are you at?
I don't think we have a copy of this.
We don't have redistricting.
No, it's not in there. I'm sorry, I'm going through my,
Okay, go ahead.
back to the charter.
Okay.
As you were reviewing section 2 of the charter.
Right.
You asked about and I don't remember where that's section 2.04. Okay, so two things. You asked to compare with statute, since there were major revisions to the municipal election code, to make sure that we're in line with redistricting. To my mind, I thought that the municipal code had a very explicit section on redistricting, and it does not. It actually says, I don't think the state law complies with national law, which says a municipality may redistrict when it feels it's warranted. That's the language in the statute. It's not accurate to the current state of the law through judicial cases, which is what everybody follows. After each decennial census, you shall review to see whether or not redistricting is needed. And so reading your redistricting language, it's actually very good language. I have no changes to the redistricting section of 2.04. And it's better language than what's in the statute. And it is saying that you're responsible for modifying as necessary, but then it gets into the federal census, appointing a committee, and that these need to be in place in time for the next municipal election. So that's all good, that's all fine. District boundaries may be altered as necessary to incorporate areas which are annexed to the city. The final sentence in A, that one's interesting to me, and I don't know, Mr. Chair, if you can give me some background. But why it says it shall be done block by block and no redistricting shall be done that breaks a block. In my experience, redistricting happens by precinct for the most part. And so, I don't know that precincts break blocks.
We were
Gerrymandered like you wouldn't believe here, so there could have been blocks that were cut in half, or a house, depending on what family lived in the corner. That's where they drew the line, okay?
Okay.
So there was even times where the polling place back in the day, you could be across the street from the polling place, but you don't vote there. You vote on the other side of town. So that one they helped keep me away from this place for a number of years. So I saw how that one worked, but I think here's where the word gerrymander was created.
Got it.
If that doesn't make any sense, I have some documents to prove some of that. But I would not think that people would want to break a block in half. But literally, if you saw some of the maps, and Cassandra probably has access to those, you'll see that they go right through depending on what family lived where.
Okay.
Because there was so little, you know what I mean?
Okay, it's not anything I recommend deleting. I thought it was sort of extra and I didn't know where it came from, but.
Well, I hope they keep
A block complete.
Because those precinct lines,
Because don't forget, there's a percentage that you have to move with, you know, it don't have to be exactly the 4 wards, the exact amount of people. That could also be time consuming, you could probably never get there.
and you've got all of that covered by saying, recommended changes shall comply with constitutional principles governing voting rights. And then the governing body shall employ a consultant with redistricting experience to work with the committee. I've been involved now in 2010, 20. So 3 redistrictings statewide and locally. And those consultants, they walk in, I have a presentation that I do to school boards of here are the constitutional standards, here's what we need to meet. You need to hire a consultant, and then they all know the standards and they draw to it.
Yeah, and I think
The general rule for municipalities is plus or minus 5%.
I think the city has always hired a consultant. We've had a number of them in the past.
And then by charter, they're required to, so.
Yeah.
And so they'll continue doing that. So again, I don't have changes to this section, and it exceeds the standard in state law. That was another homework assignment to review that.
Is that one
Qualify because we're home rule, we can do that? Have more than the state law?
Yes, you just can't be inconsistent with it. You can't be inconsistent with state law. We can get deep in this, but the Supreme Court just issued a decision last week where municipalities were defying certain state law and passing ordinances against certain medical services. And the Supreme Court said, no, you've exceeded your authority, even if you are a charter, to pass those types of ordinances. So, I can't give you a bright line there.
But you'll review that for consistency, right?
That's what I'm doing now.
Yeah.
And so you've exceeded, you're within your authority and you've given more clarity than state law.
Okay.
On redistricting. Let's see, next homework assignment. That concludes how far I got. Let me tell you what we have left. Vacancy in office I've partially addressed with the residency issues, but I do have to review to see if what it looks like versus the new municipal code, election code. I do need to draft up as a proposal in 2.07B, the way that special meetings are called, where it says special meetings may be called by 3 members of the governing body. This will get us back into our numeric debate. If you're 8 members, that's fine. If you're a 5-member board, you've probably violated the Open Meetings Act by getting 3 of you communicating to call a special meeting. So that would either need to move down to 2, or it could stay 3 under an 8.
Do you know of anything that's different than that? Because I would imagine that if you have the full 8 members, including the mayor, you could probably have a special meeting with 4, and it could still not pass because the other 4 and the mayor could kill whatever those 4 wanted to do.
Well, it's calling the special meeting.
Oh, okay.
It's just simply calling it. Now, I do want to look at 207B again, because I think, unless it has it, 207, 207B, special meetings, okay. May be held on the call of a mayor or of 3 or more members of the council. So I just wanted to make sure that a mayor, more often than not, the chair of the body is able to call a special meeting on their own. That's the norm. And then, but if the chair refuses to call one, what's the process for getting one called? If we stay in an existing 4-member, then it should be 2. But if you move up to an 8-member, 3 is fine.
I had one of those. I was out of town, but I got here in time.
Right, a special meeting to fire
Two
a city
items.
manager or something.
Yeah, 2 items, yeah. It was interesting.
Okay, so that deals with special meetings, 207, 207A, and I will draft up any edits to the edits to these. Yes, the organizational meeting, that needs to get restructured because we've changed the election cycle. So it should be the first meeting after January 1st. There's gonna be better language than that.
Yeah.
But there are probably 3 regular meetings after an election, and nobody's seated yet. They don't get seated to January 1st, it's gonna be the first regular meeting after that.
And I've noticed that in between the administrations, maybe not as much on a city, but the school boards, there's all kinds of stuff going on in those 3 meetings. And then here comes the new body, the first of the year, whenever their term starts, and they've got to start going through all that. And a lot of that stuff is challengeable in court, and I know that happened here locally and has happened before, you know. You can't pretty much set the goal too high prior to leaving office.
There was a statute passed last year in the school code that said during that period, there are certain actions you can't take.
And that's one.
You can't increase a superintendent's pay or contract during that period. And for the beginning, I want to say 2 months after a new board comes in, they can't fire a superintendent during that time. Because those were the things that were getting caught up in the elections. And you had several school boards would call a special meeting on December 31st to extend the superintendent's contract 3 years, right? So, yeah.
I would only say mi plebe, but I think it's everybody.
Yeah, the plebe del estado,
Yeah, the entire plebe now.
Okay,
So that has to change, right? No
that
matter
has to
what.
change, and then you asked for homework. What I'm using is a green marker when I complete them. You asked for homework that I will be working on regarding remote attendance. And so in 207D, we needed to reflect that roll call votes will also be used if there's remote attendance. And then we're looking at E, and I've got to re-examine E. I've got notes to re-examine E. It's very little homework left, but there was just a little, the concepts we worked on today consumed the majority of my time.
Go ahead, Mr. Benny.
Mr. Chairman, just a point of clarification for myself. So as the charter currently reads, remote attendance does not count? Or is it in dispute?
Okay.
Up there.
So Remote attendance wasn't contemplated.
At
It's
the
not
time.
addressed one
not,
way or
okay.
the other. Your Open Meetings Act, so let's go through all the complexity. Prior to COVID, nobody contemplated remote attendance.
Mhm.
The Open Meetings Act allows for, prior to COVID, it allowed for telephonic attendance, and it uses the word telephonic. Telephonic attendance I'm losing the word, but only as needed. You cannot regularly attend telephonically. You're supposed to regularly attend in person. But for those occasions where you must attend remotely, it was allowed by telephone, so long as your Open Meetings Act resolution allowed for it. Okay, so let's start from there. That's the basics. That's actually, the law is still written that way today. The complicator was COVID. When COVID came and we started meeting by Zoom and meeting remotely, and it was mandated by the Attorney General's office that you can't meet in person during the public health order. So now you must meet remotely. And everybody got used to that. That was pretty good. That was pretty easy. I loved my charitable board meetings because I didn't have to drive across town. So we all meet remotely, and the AG's office gave guidelines for remote attendance, saying if you're meeting remotely, now you have to vote by roll call, every vote, no more voice votes. And they have to be able to identify you, so our names appear on the Zoom. So all of these things are rules that if the remote connection goes down, you have to pause the meeting. All of those things. That was all during COVID. Well, post-COVID, once that public health order ended, everybody back in the pool, everybody in place. But the AG's office has been flexible to say that telephonic attendance is remote attendance. It's so if you occasionally have to meet remotely or because of a health condition or something, you have to meet remotely, then you're allowed to do so, but we've got to go back to recording by roll call vote. So as I look at these, remote attendance is more commonplace. It is. Before, the sick member that couldn't show up, they just didn't show up.
Mhm.
But now they can still participate. So we just put some guidelines. So it's looking at it for updating in that context. That's a lot of history, but I wanted you to see the whole picture of why we're looking at it today. And AG has promised now for 2 years that they are going to update Open Meetings Act to deal with remote attendance. They haven't. I don't know why. I haven't even seen a bill introduced. But they're supposed to be addressing this. And with my contacts, because I call the AG's office, I still have people that I reach out and go, hey, are we out of compliance here? No, we're not. We're not really looking at that. Great, well, will you put that in writing somewhere? No, you'll see a bill in another year or two. So, so anyway, we've got to do some of it ourselves.
I think,
Thank you for that
I
answer.
think we got
Appreciate it.
that one. Do you have anything else?
In your homework, that was it? I think you covered it.
I ended at 2.07.
Okay.
A, B, D, and E. And I will come back with something in this living, breathing document that will have those in there.
So let's just say that
For
we,
reference, I'm changing the date here.
okay,
Each time I publish this, maybe I'll make it more prominent and in a bright color so that in your notes, you know which version is which. But for now, I'm changing the date in the upper right-hand corner.
So
I'm
I'm
thinking down the road, let's say that we finished and we voted on all the stuff we're recommending. And we have one document, we send it to city council. And by that time, hopefully we visited with them, it came back to us, we modified it, hopefully took on their considerations, their recommendations under consideration. And then you'll update the document again to make sure that we covered it all and that that's the last piece before it goes to them. And then you'll be working with them in case they modify it, right?
Correct, correct.
Okay.
Which they can only do in a public meeting, and as commission members, you'd be able to attend those meetings as they do that.
Okay, so we finished the 2.0, the 2 whatever. Now we're at the mayor. Where are we at in that one
We haven't started that.
at all?
We ended at 2.07.
Well, and we're at the 5 o'clock hour in 5 minutes, so, to tell you the truth, because we have 2 members missing and possibly a third, maybe this is a good point to stop. I know that you've been here all day. Counselor, I know that you've had some other things. You were already here when I got here, and I got here this morning at 6. So I don't know what you've been up to here, but you're working too much. Mayor, you haven't been doing too many things. One of the things that I'd like for you to do for the next meeting then, if that's okay with everyone, I have 2 things I want to bring up. Number one, and you'll have to clarify this for me, because don't forget, I was mayor in the 1800s, and a lot's changed between then and now. So the agenda itself, in my era, was put together by the manager with work from the directors. And then the mayor approved it as a final document. Is that still the way it works?
Are you talking for commission meetings or just broadly?
Broadly? Not for us, for the mayor and council. So back in the day, the mayor had the final say on the agenda. Is that still the case?
Let's start from practice. Is that the practice?
So that's the practice.
Okay, because that's
That was
what
the practice before, like,
Basically, the practice now, the way it is, department heads work with Cassandra. And what we've been doing as a group is myself, the clerk, the city manager, and finance, because some of this stuff is financial that they have to get signed off of. So we sit together, and at the end, basically it is up to the mayor's discretion. As far as, councilors getting things on the agenda, I'm very open. Before, I know we had a mayor that if they didn't want to put it on, they wouldn't put it on. So I'm very open into,
so I guess the difference in mayor from then to now is everything funneled to the city manager. And then the manager would turn it over to the mayor for his review. And still, literally, at some point, the mayor had the option to remove an item if he didn't think it was ready to be considered. So can that be done up to and including the meeting itself, or because of the Open Meetings Act, you can't modify the agenda?
The short answer is with the Open Meetings Act and the requirements that are very clear now, 72 hours prior to the start of the meeting, the agenda is locked down. The only modification I've advised, it's not in statute, but I've advised is if we know in advance that something is not going to be considered, that you put a strike through to say not being heard in case a bunch of people are they're gonna feed their kids, get their homework done, and race down to City Hall, and it's not gonna be heard, they're gonna find out it's not gonna be heard. If you know for some reason that it's just not gonna happen, then you find a way to notify the community so that they're not screeching down
Okay.
here. But you leave it on the agenda, you just put it in strike through, to say postponed until next meeting.
So the mayor has a shot up to 72 hours prior.
Yes, everybody's got a shot up to 72 hours prior.
So pretty much the practice is, I know when we meet, it's usually the Wednesday or Thursday, depending on Cassandra's timeline and what she's received in. Once we finalize it, then that's pretty much it. Because of the 72 hours,
It's sort of a committee
she
compared to
posts
what it
it,
was
she
before.
posts it online, sends it to the newspaper,
Radio
all the
station.
radio stations and everything. And once she submits it, then there's no changing it.
But you can
And
change
you
the order.
definitely can't add anything. You cannot add anything.
And the order can be changed at the meeting, like if.
Depending on
Counselor wants to
presentation and the
make an
distance
amendment
for
to-
items on the agenda, that kind of
Right.
stuff.
Yeah, sometimes you move it around. I advise that you try and move things down the agenda and not things up the agenda in case someone said, oh, I gotta feed my kids, I gotta do this, I gotta do that, but it's last on the agenda, so I'll show up at.
Everybody eats at 8 o'clock here, Gino, you know how that goes. No, I'm just kidding. I think it's well intentioned. So the only other item that I have to bring up, Cassandra, did you have anything else?
No, I do not.
Okay. I actually checked earlier with Cassandra, so just so you all know, we had a meeting that's already been scheduled by the commission on March the 5th. Since the last meeting to this meeting, and it's really up to the discretion of the commission, I won't be able to attend that meeting. I've got to go back to DC and testify again on behalf of AM and FM radio on the electric vehicle dashboard. So I was asking, I can't believe I'm still doing that. We had it done and they didn't put it in the big bill at the end of this last Congress. But, so I asked Cassandra if there's some possible dates. She's gonna look at it, but I needed to ask you, members of the commission, if that was something you wouldn't mind doing. Now, you can still have a meeting, we have a vice chair, but I just wanted to make sure, that at least I notified you all and let you know. I won't be here for March the 5th, but I can make almost any meeting, depending on the calendar, the following week. The city council meetings are probably the
I think you
12th.
mentioned the 11th or the 13th would be
Yeah,
the
those are
two
days
dates.
that could work for us without Mondays and Fridays being considered, but it's really at the discretion of the board, but I just wanted to let you all know. I know for a fact that I can't make that meeting. I just got scheduled for that.
I'm flexible. March 5th is Ash Wednesday anyway, so
It is?
it is.
Okay.
On my calendar here.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, no, I could be wrong.
I'm okay either way.
That's what this
I
calendar says.
imagine Ashley could chair the meeting, but
No, I'm wrong on that.
if you wanna be here, I'm
like to,
fine
but-
with changing the
It
date.
is, I looked at.
Is it?
It is?
Yeah, that's what my calendar says, but I don't know if it's just a US calendar or.
So I have availability to move the meeting to the next week would be fine. It actually may work better for me because there's a possibility that I may not be here on March the 5th either.
Okay. So Cassandra, can you check on those 2 days
And I'll let the
and
commission.
let us know? And then let, for sure, Ashley and Joseph know as well. But, like I said, I needed to ask permission first before I considered anything, so I wanted to double check with you all. Is that okay with you, Gino? With your?
Those dates work fine, March 11th and 13th. I will disclose that I have a very complicated February 5th. There's an online training that I can actually just do from here, and then I'll move from that into the meeting. But I need to be in Taos for a school board meeting that evening. And so I need to leave probably about 4:30 on the 5th.
So could we move our meeting to maybe 2:30 or 2 o'clock?
We're talking about the 5th of
That online
February.
training.
Oh, you're in the, so you've got a gap.
Yeah, it's,
Yeah.
I'll do the online training if it's okay with the mayor from that table, starting at 1:30. It's supposed to run to 3:30, but I'll cut it off at 3. And then I've got the ability to meet with you, but then I would need to hit the road by.
Well, why don't we do this? Why don't you just keep that in mind, that 4:30 is a good cutoff time, and if we do, we just don't get too complicated, because we'll have to just be very generic without legal counsel. Okay, if that,
It was good.
yeah, no, we're lucky we have a good staff here. We're very fortunate. Well, and the good thing is, and I haven't heard her input yet, because, a lot of these things land up in her office. I'm waiting for the juicy stuff that you're gonna throw at us. We wanna know what you're thinking about there, Cassandra.
Okay.
Okay, so, are there anything else that we need to discuss? Okay, if not, hearing none no other items to consider, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Is there a second?
Second,
There's a motion and a second. All in favor?
aye.
Opposed?